The League of Women Voters is a national nonpartisan organization formed to encourage citizen participation in government. It never supports or opposes any political party or candidate. The statements and opinions of the candidates are presented solely in the interest of public service and in no way are to be construed as an endorsement thereof by the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters takes no responsibility for any of the views or facts stated by the candidates.
Good evening, and welcome to the League of Women Voters Oakland Area Candidate Forum for the Michigan State House of Representatives, District 45. My name is Carla Brisbois-Gribbs, and I'm a regional manager for DT Energy and a member of the League of Women Voters Oakland Area. Welcome to our venue in the city of Rochester Hills, the beautiful City Hall. I'd like to take a moment to remind all members of the audience to turn off their cell phones, pagers, those wonderful electronic devices. Voting is perhaps one of the most important rights that we have in the United States, and the League is pleased to present the opportunity for you to be very informed about your choices in the upcoming August 5th primary election so that you can spend your vote wisely. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages active participation in government, and we work to increase individuals' understanding of public policy through education and advocacy. The League of Women Voters Oakland Area has prepared a voter's guide or voter's guides for the upcoming election. For the local races, you can go to our website at lwvoa.org. However, for state races like the one tonight and national races, we ask you to go to a website called Vote 411, VOTE 411. All of the candidates tonight will appear, as I mentioned, in the primary election ballot on Tuesday, August 5th. The candidate who ultimately gets elected to the state representative for the 45th district will receive a 2-year term with an annual salary of $71,685. The 45th district includes the cities of Rochester and Rochester Hills, as well as Oakland Township. Michigan state representatives are limited to 3 2-year terms. The Michigan House of Representatives does share responsibility with the Michigan Senate to enact new laws, amend, or repeal existing laws. During the primary, it is important for voters to remember that you can only cast a vote in one party. In the Democratic primary, in the Democratic Party, Joanna VanRaaphorst is running unopposed. In the Republican Party, there are 3 appearing on the ballot: Mark Avery, Lana Mangiapane, and Michael Weber. The winner of the Republican Party will be advanced to the general election along with the Democratic candidate in November. So let's get right to it. The candidates have drawn for the order of speaking and will introduce themselves with a brief 1-minute opening statement. Following the opening statement, the candidates will respond to questions from audience members that can be directed to any or all of the candidates. Each candidate will have the opportunity to respond to any question asked, and we will allow rebuttals. Responses will not necessarily be strictly timed. However, we have asked the candidates to keep their answers to 2 minutes or less. And I would remind the audience that questions and responses, for that matter, may only address issues that pertain to the position of state representative. We do not tolerate things like personal attacks. And again, we would ask that the audience please hold all applause till the end of the program. So now let's begin with the opening statements with candidates competing for the state representative seat in District 45. Our first candidate is Lana Mangiapane. Ms. Mangiapane. You know, and I'm going to ask you to get really close to that microphone because, let's see. Well,
I'm close enough.
You are.
Okay. I would like to introduce myself to you. I'm Lana Mangiapane. I'm an American constitutional Republican for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I'm a licensed real estate broker and builder. My specific duties are to promote and protect the interests of my clients and abide by the rules and regulations of the state of Michigan. I'm a skillful and knowledgeable professional who enjoys working for and with people. Like many of you sitting here tonight, I have become an expert in my field. I'm known as an advocate for pro-life from conception till natural death. I advocate for the handicapped, veterans, senior citizens, the Second Amendment, protection of real estate and business rights, and the Constitution of the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Second, our next candidate is Michael Weber. Mr. Weber.
Good evening. I just want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this candidate forum here tonight. And my name, again, Mike Weber, running on the Republican side for state representative. Grew up in the area, 24-year resident. Went to school in the area, graduate of Rochester Adams High School. My wife, Julia, is in the audience, also a product of our Rochester Community Schools. And for the almost past 7 years, I've had the honor of serving my hometown on the Rochester Hills City Council. Currently serve as the vice president of the City Council. And I think, you know, this is a very important decision we have coming up. We are essentially electing, hiring somebody to represent us in Lansing, our community, on these important issues. And I think we need somebody that has experience, certainly somebody that has had results in that position. And then service to community, I think, is a big part of who I am and what we do. And I think being involved in the community allows you to better serve that community. So looking forward to the questions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Mark Avery. Mr. Avery.
Well, thank you. My name is Mark Avery. I thank the League of Women Voters for hosting the forum. I kind of have a unique background, and so I kind of want to discuss it a little bit. I started my first company when I was 21 years old. Since then, I have 2 more companies that I've started. I've worked in higher education at Wayne State University and Oakland University for 9 years. I've spent the last 6 years helping people with property tax and having the local municipalities give back $4.5 million to the homeowners. I've hosted 120, or I've presented at 120 town hall meetings throughout the state of Michigan for state legislators. I have a degree in mechanical engineering. I have my real estate license. I had my insurance license. I've helped over 300 of my former campers in my baseball program partially or fully fund their college education. And most importantly, I'm raising my 13-year-old little beautiful daughter. And I look forward to your questions, and I just wanted you to understand what a unique perspective I can bring to this position. Thank you.
Thank you. And our fourth candidate, the Democratic Party, is Joanna VanRaaphorst. Ms. VanRaaphorst.
Thank you. Good evening. I too want to thank the League of Women Voters, but I want to thank you all for coming out on this rainy night, and I'd like to thank people who might be watching on television. Tonight we are being interviewed for the position of state representative. This is an outstanding community comprised of many educated people that work in a wide variety of fields. We are critical thinkers. We deal with facts, not ideology, and we know how to get things done. And we expect the same from our representative in Lansing. For too long, we've had people in Lansing who have let their ideology get in the way of practical solutions. I have worked for major corporations, the Holiday Inn and Sheraton, for 2 nonprofits, and we own a small business here in Rochester Hills. And much of what goes on in Lansing would not be tolerated in the corporate world. The job of our state representative is to work tirelessly for this community, not outside interests. I will work to support our public schools here in the Rochester area and Avondale. I will help fix our roads and work on the problems that have occurred with oil and gas leasing in our neighborhoods and community parks. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I have a tremendous energy level, and I look forward to putting that energy to work for you.
Thank you very much. So now for our first questions from our audience. And again, before asking your question, I'd ask that you identify who that question is for. And I'm going to start in the back of the room, and if you have a question, just give me a hand signal, and I will be around to all of you. And who is your question for?
I'm going to direct my question to the Republican candidates. My question is, how would you differentiate yourself or not differentiate yourself from our current state representative, Tom McMillan, or do you agree with everything that he's done? Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't we start with Mr. Avery, Mark Avery.
I would say probably the biggest difference is Tom McMillan's more, I'm a conservative, I think he's more of a libertarian. I think there is a role for government, but I think that role should be limited and transparent. I also think that government has grown way too large, and so for me, I would like to see government start to shrink to allow businesses to grow, because if we don't allow businesses to grow more, we're going to have trouble hiring more and more people, and if we don't have more and more of our, jobs in the state of Michigan, we're going to have definitely have problems with all of our college grads and high school grads finding jobs in the area. So I think that's kind of important for me to make sure that we work hard to make it possible to have jobs in the state of Michigan. So that's probably where I'm different.
Michael Weber.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate the question, and I guess I would echo some of the comments of Mr. Avery in terms of, I am a conservative Republican, John Engler Republican. Actually, that was my first job right out of college, working for the former governor, whereas I think Representative McMillan probably, and I think he would pride himself in saying that he's probably more of a libertarian. I think just the focus, I would focus similar to what we've done on the city council level on the jobs and economy issues. I think, certainly we're starting to recover from the lost decade, but it's a lot harder to go from good to great than it is from bad to good, essentially. And so we're kind of in that middle area in terms of attracting jobs. And, I think the governor and the legislature have done a good job over the last 3.5 years to address some of these issues, but we still have a ways to go. So focus on jobs and the economy. We've been able to do that in the city of Rochester Hills. We have the second lowest unemployment rate in the state, and we've done that by focusing on those things. I think also focusing on the budgeting for our priorities, because we've been able to move to a 3-year budget. We have the AAA bond rating, and I think that all helps in terms of having a stable government.
Lana Mangiapane.
I'm a woman and he's a man, and I have a focus from a different perspective because I'll get closer to the mic. I'm in the real estate field, and I deal with people's personal property and their businesses. And I've been focused this particular time for the last several months on several issues. And one is roads, one's schools, one's taxes. I've been also focused a lot on human trafficking. So I have a little bit different perspective than he does. And I'm always looking to reduce all of the bureaucratic red tape for businesses and less taxation. I know that we've had a $100 million surplus, and since the beginning of the year, I've been looking into that to see where we could use it and where it came from and where it could go. I like to see a structurally balanced budget. I like debt reduction, and I think those two things will create more certainty for the business community and commercial markets. I know that we need to implement a budget that would include a general plan for roads and schools.
Thank you. And who is your question for?
This would be for all 4 candidates, I guess. I think some people would feel, I feel anyway, there's been a war on women in Michigan over the last several years where the Republicans have been in charge of the legislature. So my question for all of the candidates would be whether you are, I think one of the candidates already stated she was a pro-life candidate, what your position is on a woman's right to choose. Secondly, would you, if you were elected, would you vote to repeal the rape insurance law that was passed in Michigan? And thirdly, since I assume the Republicans are going to be pro-life, would you be also in favor of passing legislation that would prevent men from getting vasectomies, since that would also be along the same vein of preventing a birth?
Okay, let's start with Joanna VanRaaphorst. We can't hear you, Joanna.
Okay, yippee-yay on that one. Okay, that's why I'm sitting on this side of the aisle. I'm a small business owner, fiscally conservative, but I'm a woman, and I find it quite interesting that these three fine folks say less government unless you're a woman and it's your health care. And women's health care is their health care, not your health care. And I'm 54, and so I lived through Roe v. Wade and all of this. And I will tell you, as a pro-choice person, that means we're not pro-abortion. In fact, as a member of Planned Parenthood and a mother of two wonderful children that we planned and saved for and we're ready for, I want every child to be wanted and be ready for, because you know how hard it is to raise a child, even when you're ready and you're well off and you're ready to go. And so for me, to answer the question, I am pro-choice. The rape insurance law was an abomination. It was a fringe group that put that through, and even our governor vetoed that. So to me, it is a war on women, and I don't know about men's vasectomy. I don't care about men's health. I just care about my health, and you guys are on your own for your health care. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Weber.
Well, I care about men's health, but you know, I appreciate the question. I am 100% pro-life. I am proud to say that I have earned, and I believe all three of us have earned, the Right to Life of Michigan endorsement in this race. Grew up Catholic. My wife and I are members at St. Andrew Catholic Church. And so it's, you know, it's certainly a personal decision, but, you know, I think good people can disagree on the issue, and they have for many, many, many years, and will continue to for many years. You know, in terms of the legislation that Mr. Falk brought up, you know, I'd have to look at it a little bit more, but I am 100% pro-life, and so that's where I'm at.
Lana Mangiapane, please. I just butchered your name, didn't I?
You
and
did it beautifully.
I apologize. Mangiapane.
I'm 100% pro-choice. I think that you can choose what you'd like to do. I'm a mother of 6, a grandmother of 23, and I believe that you should have the choice to do as you please, especially when it comes to buying your own insurance. I own a business, and I can tell you that for employees that I paid $700 a month for a few months ago, now they're about $2,300 a month. I do not want to pay for any insurance in a spot where it should be your choice. So if you want to choose to have an abortion, or if you want to choose to have a vasectomy, it is not my choice to pay for it for you. I will pay for all the standard types of health care and be happy to do that. Also, I think I addressed it. Was there any other things, sir, that you wanted to know from me in particular?
It was about passing legislation to prevent vasectomies or the payment of.
Well, I don't know that there would be, well, I think that that's a choice. So I would not be promoting vasectomies and wanting to pay for it with my tax money. So it would be a choice of mine not to want to pay for more insurances for people.
Thank you. Mark Avery?
Oh. Thank you. I'm 100% pro-life and unapologetic about it. I think that we have to protect the weakest among us, which are the children, and so that's why I'm pro-life. The issue about the rape insurance, I think you're talking business versus the fact that government can come down on businesses and tell them what to do insurance-wise, I think is one of the biggest hindrances we have. So the idea that they can force us to buy insurance to do this or do that, or to pay, I think government needs to stay out of that insurance business. We've already seen what's happened at the federal level, and when in 2008, I have an HSA, and I think my daughter and I, our insurance was about $180 a month, plus I paid, you know, the big $5,200 up front. But then I found out after, you know, the Affordable Care Act, all of a sudden my insurance is about $600 a month, plus I still pay that. So anytime government gets involved in insurance, you see what happens to the small business people like myself. So anytime that I can keep government out of insurance, I'm going to do it. And about the vasectomy, I don't even.
Joanna, you have a rebuttal?
Yes. Again, I'd like to go back to, if you're pro-choice, you still are pro-life. And I think it's interesting that Right to Life was approached by the state representative or state senator and said, will you help us? We're losing our funding for these neonatal children in Detroit, and we need about $500,000 for a matching grant, and Right to Life said, no, we're not interested in that. And so to me, it's not a right to be born, it's a right to have your whole life. So if you want, if we're alike in that way. But that's the right to be wanted. It's a right to have health insurance. I met somebody at the door and she said, I'm pro-life, but I don't believe anybody should have health insurance. I said, well, do you have health insurance? Yes, I do. Well, what about people who don't? And so, I think we need to expand about the poor. There's just a lot of things about life that is beyond being born. And that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you. And who's your question for?
My question is for Mr. Weber, Mr. Avery, and Mrs. VanRaaphorst. And my name is Mike Powers, and my question deals with the oil and gas horizontal drilling issue going on around Rochester Hills and some of the other local communities. And the question, without going into all the details, is I'll frame it around transparency and the spirit of dealing with a community. We have a charter. There's no need to get into the charter thing, but in the spirit of transparency, how would you deal with an issue, an extraordinary issue like this affecting people in our subdivision?
So you realize this is for a state representative position. What would your question be that would be towards someone at the state level?
Well, okay, I should have probably explained also that Tom McMillan, who's a state representative, is involved in this. So if you were to replace Tom McMillan or somebody in there, how would you deal with this kind of an issue at the state level?
Okay, fair enough. Shall we start with Lana
He didn't
Mangiapane?
ask me.
I'm sorry, you are the one that does not have to answer. Okay.
I didn't want to hear from
All right, Mr. Avery. Mr. Avery.
First of all, on the oil and gas issue, I think I'm pro-energy across the board, but in a situation like this, if I, as a property rights guy, if the city of Rochester Hills comes under and drills underneath my house, they would probably have to ask me for the right to do that. Now, in this case, the property that is owned by the city, I would have probably chosen a different path and asked for the right to drill underneath our city's land. So is it legal to do it? It probably was legal, or there's a loophole to do it, but I think the idea would have been, for me, would have been to have the city ask its citizens whether they would want that done on their behalf.
Thank you. Mr. Weber.
Yeah, Mr. Powers, I certainly appreciate the question. And, as Mr. Powers knows, the city is currently in litigation with a group. So there's not a ton I can say, but just in terms of talking, I guess, around the issue, if you will, the charter amendment that is being discussed, I supported the charter amendment. I supported putting it on the ballot. I signed the petition. I voted for it. And at the same election that we all voted on the charter amendment, we also voted to have people on the city council and the mayor represent us as a community. And so when this issue came up nearly 2 years ago, the first question, especially folks like myself that supported the charter amendment, first question we had for our city attorney, and I'm not an attorney, so I rely on the city attorney's decision, was do we need to take this to a vote of the people? And it's interesting because some of the people that were involved with the ballot initiative in November of 11 actually came to those meetings and said this is not a violation of that charter amendment. So I think, whether you're a city councilman or a state representative, you get elected to represent majority of the citizens, but you get elected to make decisions. You're not a traffic cop where you're putting 100 issues on the ballot. You have to make decisions, and they're not going to all be popular. I mean, I can tell you I don't have a 100% voting record on city council with my wife. There's certain issues that she doesn't like, but I think we tried to approach it in a transparent way. We had a couple meetings on the issue. We continue to talk about the issue, and I guess that's how I would approach it.
Thank you. Joanna VanRaaphorst.
Well, I think we missed the part of the question about transparency. And I think, like Mike, you've been in politics for a long time, and I applaud you for that. But for us average citizens here, we get frustrated because I think people feel their voices aren't heard. And I feel, in my opinion, that the pulse of the community wasn't apparent to you. You know, I was endorsed by Sierra Club, and we're not all just Birkenstock, you know, tofu, eating brown rice, although I do have Birkenstocks, tofu, and I eat tofu. But what I want to say is I think there's a lot more people concerned about the environment, A, and B, I think there's a lot of people that feel that their voices aren't heard, and clearly that's the case here because it was the assumption that they had a right to vote on this, and just putting something on an agenda as you've had all these people come and talk to, they're all busy people like I talked to you before, and to just say it was on the agenda, I would have done it, to answer your question. I would have said, boy, this is kind of a big deal. How about we wait for a couple months? Why don't we have some community forums? Let's get some scientists here, and let's think this through. I don't know what the hurry was to make, it wasn't to make $10,000. I know it wasn't. So I think it was kind of rushed through, and I think you folks did not have a pulse of the community, and now it's come to rest, and it would have been avoided if we had taken our time and it had been thoughtfully thought through, and that's how I like to operate.
Mr. Weber, excuse me, I've asked for no applause until the end of the program. Thank you. Mr. Weber.
Yeah, I guess I just want to add something else, and we did talk about property rights, people's property rights, and you know certainly this decision was made at the council level with regard to city property, but then we also have over 400 different residents that have signed individual leases where they have the right, the mineral rights underneath their home, underneath their property. They have the right to lease those. And so I think, you know, we've also had a number of homeowner associations that have also made that decision. So I think at the end of the day, you know, each of those individual residents had to make that decision. I think at the council level, again, you know, we tried to make the best decision with the information that we had. Certainly, we've had a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking in the community on it, and that's part of the process. That's part of the democratic process. So I take that constructive criticism every Monday night, but I appreciate the question.
Thank you. And your question is for?
This will be for all four of the candidates, please. Governor Snyder has been championing the state of Michigan being involved as part of what's called the Grand Bargain, which ties in with the City of Detroit's bankruptcy, the Detroit Institute of Art, and the pensions. My question for all four of you, if you were sitting right now in the State House, how would you have voted on this?
Okay, so how about if we start with Lana Mangiapane?
Thanks for the question, Chris. If I were sitting in the State House right now about the state of Michigan funding Detroit, I would, and funding the Art Institute and the different areas that you ask about funding, I would have to vote no. And I believe that there is some monies that are available. I believe that we need Detroit. It's a border border community there, and I think we have to have our import-export business. We need them. They're crucial to our success, and I'd like to see us do that. But at this point, I don't think we have enough information to make a good decision. So I would have to say no right now.
Mr. Weber.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate the question, and I think I too would have been a no vote, and for a few different reasons. You know, as I've been going door to door in this community, talking to people, you know, they're tired of hearing the words Detroit and bailout in the same sentence. They're tired of Detroit being bailed out all the time. Now, I know there were, you know, I don't know if any of us have quite the information that the people that were in the legislative rooms were getting in terms of talking with judges with regard to you know, what the state would be liable for if we did not do the grand bargain, and if we ended up it ended up going through the court system, and then there was a settlement. The state may be on the hook for more than the $195 million. So from an insurance perspective, I'm a licensed insurance agent. That's called, essentially you're capping your exposure, if you will. The state is basically saying, 195 is all that we're going to do. But, sitting here with the information that I have, just reading in the newspaper, I think people are tired of Detroit being bailed out, and I think there's some good things going on down there. I think Mayor Duggan has come in and has done good. I think people are waiting for this emergency manager, time frame to end, so that the elected officials can make the decisions going forward. But I just don't think it was the right move at this time.
Mr. Avery.
Going door to door like Mike has, I've hit about 5,000 voters. And one of the things that I've heard only one time, is that they want Detroit bailed out. So to represent our people in Lansing, I think it's very important that we do, and these situations, to represent our constituents. The one issue that I had is that they're going to take a system that's broken, they're going to put money in it, and they're not going to change the system. So if they think that we're not going to get back to that same situation that we're in now, so my biggest concern is in the grand bargain is they didn't fix the problem. They just kicked the can down the road a bit by just throwing some money at it. They should have changed the pension program, and then they would have made it possible for us to maybe stomach helping them out. But the idea that we're going to give them money and they're going to do the same thing and we're going to come back to us 20 years down the road wouldn't be acceptable for me. I would have voted no.
Ms. VanRaaphorst.
You can guess what I will say. No, I'm teasing. I'm a maybe, and here's why. I sat down with Tim Greimel, our House Minority Leader, talked to him for 3 hours. This morning I was with a group of financial investment people and at a seminar. I know you folks might know Leon LeBrecq, and he's really involved in downtown Detroit. And I'll tell you what, first of all, it's a Republican governor who, against the will of the people, appointed a highly trained emergency manager, and then he went in there and did the job that the governor asked him to do. And I haven't seen the 12-page report, so that's why I'm a maybe. But it's a horrible thing. Who wants to pay extra taxes? Nobody wants to do it. But do we want people on welfare? And these retirees are all throughout Michigan, and then we're going to pay more. And I think that was the impression that I got, that absolutely right. You're all three right. And you all are probably right. Who wants to do it? But what is the alternative is to have these people go on welfare. There's no dignity in that. And so that's why I'd love to see that report. So I'm not a firm no or a firm yes. I'd like more details.
Thank you.
It's a tough one.
Mr. Weber.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to add as well, and there was just an article about this recently, is that the revenue sharing that all these communities get, including the city of Rochester Hills, Detroit gets, and I know it's a bigger city, but they get a disproportionately higher amount than everybody else. And so this has been an ongoing problem, and I agree with Mr. Avery. I don't think that they got enough in the deal in terms of some of the pension reforms that they could have gotten. But I think it's probably not even going to be something where they're going to come back in 20 years. It's probably going to be more like 3 or 4. And I think everybody's kidding themselves that they think that this is it. This is the end.
Mr. Avery.
Oh, no, I just want to reiterate, it's either fix the problem so it doesn't come back, and we didn't do it. And that's why I would have voted no.
Okay, thank you. And your question is for?
This for all 4 candidates. Governor Snyder has suggested 50,000 visas for highly educated, high-ability overseas workers to be entrepreneurs in Michigan. Michigan has tens of thousands of high-ability children in our schools not getting needed educational services. What would you do to support the education of Michigan's high-ability children so that we can create our own entrepreneurs?
Let's start with Mr. Weber.
I certainly appreciate that question, and I agree. I mean, I think you need to have an environment. I think the governor calls it economic gardening, or in terms of expanding the businesses that are currently here. A small business maybe starts off with just if my wife and I created a small business tomorrow, and then, you know, you see these businesses, and I know like Mrs. VanRaaphorst, she has a business, and then, you know, you add on people from there, and that obviously affects families. You know, in terms of education, certainly, you know, product of the public schools here in Rochester. I've had some discussions with some of our Rochester, not only our school board members, but also our superintendent. And, you know, I think that they're doing a great job. We do need to make education a priority. We do have to, you know, people think, you know, they hear president, you know, different presidents, obviously both parties at the federal level talk about education, but it's really a state and local issue. And so I would certainly, you know, I've been a staff person on the education committee in the past, so those issues are pretty critical for me.
Ms. Mangiapane?
I believe that we have some problems in our schools. I agree with you. In Michigan, we have a real problem with our standards of learning, and they're not capped in Michigan. We have the measurement of knowledge and skill for the base of subjects in math, science, social studies, reading and writing shows that 40% of Michigan students tested performing at grade level or above. Unbelievably, 60% of students are below grade level in those subjects. The student count for the state of Michigan is about 1.5 million. The average state aid per pupil is about $7,500. The average teacher salary is $62,600, and the pupil-teacher ratio is 23:1. Statewide, we're losing many bright, courageous teachers in our education system. Year after year, the majority of students in Michigan schools are below grade level in academic knowledge. It's time to look at our school programs. It's time to thank our teachers for their commitment. And let's recognize those teachers and their commitment. Let's hire teachers to teach. Hire teachers who like children. Hire teachers who have a passion to give desire to learn to others. Let's give teachers continued education. Teachers need to be kept up to date on the latest technology to be able to communicate with their students and their students' families. Let's have a criteria of achievements that is publicly acknowledged by the state board every year for the teachers. If they're a good teacher, if they fulfill all their criteria, let's give them some recognition in our state. Again, I'd like to say we need teachers to teach students. And the question was, I'm sorry,
So if you could bring your comments to a close and move on to the next person. Do you have anything else to add to that, Lana?
Well, I would like students to see that students can learn that instruction is a gift from teachers that show joy in being able to give to others.
Thank you. Mr. Avery.
Well, I'm kind of confused now. What was the question? Because I've heard the two answers. I have no idea what the question was now.
Would you like to re-ask your question, sir?
We're suggesting bringing in a number of overseas workers, but we've got a lot of high-ability children in our schools. So what would you do to support the education of Michigan's high-ability children to create our own entrepreneurs?
Well, this is kind of hits home for me. When I coached at Oakland University, I had 24 high-end student athletes. These are high-end scholarship athletes that I brought in my 5-year period. These are kids that were 3.5. Some, probably half of them played professional baseball. When we got all done with spending K through 12, sending them through 4 years of school and graduating them, spending about $2 million for 12 of those students, we have exported them to other states to work. I would love to just see our kids coming back, our high-end achieving kids coming back. I've got a kid in Colorado, 2 in Florida, Virginia, Kentucky, these are high-end kids. Why don't we just start bringing our own kids back or create a situation that our own kids can stay home, these high achievers? So that's what I would like to do, is to bring our kids back.
Thank you. Ms. VanRaaphorst.
I guess I consider myself maybe quite well versed in our schools. I've been to 12 PTA meetings, and you sit in with them from K, elementary, middle, and high school. I've met with a lot of teachers, so I think it's just easy to say we're not doing a good enough job. But look at our, Adams is outstanding, Stoney's outstanding, and Rochester High. So, to your question, I think it always can be improved, but we are doing a pretty darn good job right here in the Rochester area, which is what I have control over, or what we're concerned with advanced placement courses and the like. So I'm seeing entrepreneurs. I'm seeing my children's kids graduate and doing big things. So I don't see there's as big of a problem as maybe you do. It always can be improved, but I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Lana?
I do have some remarks to make about Rochester Adams, which is a great school. The percentage of graduates who passed at least one college-level test during high school is 52.5%. And the number of college-level tests given at school in the previous calendar year, that would be in 12-13, divided by the number of graduates that year was 2.526. But this is surprising. The percentage of students who come from families that qualify for lunch subsidies is 67%. So we have typical families in our area that exceed and do very, very well.
Thank you, Ms. Mangiapane. Yes, Mr. Avery.
I think as a state rep, though, we're dealing with the statewide issue of education. Our schools are fantastic here. We're rated in the top 10% in our high schools. So I think when you're looking at this, we can't just look at Rochester Hills. We have to look at the amount of money we're spending statewide and failing schools. And there are a ton of failing schools and failing a lot of kids. So when you asked a statewide question, this was a statewide question. This wasn't about our situation. So I think the biggest issue for me in public education at this point is it's too top-heavy. The money's not being spent in the classroom, and I'll give you an example. I spent about 2.5 hours with the assistant superintendent of business for Rochester schools, and he showed me the numbers. We spend 62% of our money on education, on teaching. We spend 35% on support somewhere along the line, and we actually do it very well. When you look at the other school districts, they spend a disproportionate amount of money on the support aspect of it, and not enough money is in the classroom. So I think that's what the biggest concern is for education for me, is getting the money back in the classroom where it belongs.
Ms. VanRaaphorst.
I'll be quick. I think another problem that I have heard from, again, sitting in on these wonderful PTA meetings that I have enjoyed, is what they're doing at the state level directly affects our schools. And they keep moving the target. It has been reform of the day for 20 years. And here's a classic example. We decided to do Common Core standards, but then we decided, well, maybe we aren't. So are we going to test in the fall like we used to, or are we going to do it in the spring? And you sit in on a PTA meeting where they say, how can they plan when they don't even know what tests we're going to have? They don't even know till next year what tests they're going to do and how they're going to implement it. And that is wasting our children's time, and that's wasting a tremendous amount of money, especially if they say, okay, now we're going to scrap it all and do it again. It is frustrating the heck out of our parents, our students, and our educators. And that is a classic example of people in Lansing having no clue what they're deciding on at an education level, how it directly impacts not just our schools, but every single school in the state of Michigan. It's appalling and it's unacceptable.
Thank you. I think we have a follow-up question also in the vein of education. Okay. Who's your question for?
This will be for all 4 candidates, please. This is a follow-up to what you just discussed. Our current representative, Mr. McMillan, has really been on a siege against public education. He's for private funded education, online education, charter schools, pretty much pushing the public education system aside. I'd like to know from all four of you how you would deal with that specific issue. Are you for privatizing online education? Do you think public education is our priority? Where do you come? Maybe you come in the middle. This is for all four candidates. Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't we start with Joanna VanRaaphorst?
It's my favorite subject. It's one of the reasons I'm running. It's one of the reasons I ran 2 years ago. We had a state representative that was doing an out-and-out attack on our own schools. And as I go door to door, people say, I moved here for our schools. And to me, to try to just break up public education, to me is appalling. And trying to make money on children's education, I just flat out don't like. And, you know, I look at my website. I've been endorsed by probably 15 of our local retired education professionals. Because you know what? Education professionals can't get political. Teachers can't say anything. Everybody's hush-hush. But look at my website. I'm proud that John Schultz, our wonderful superintendent, is a proud supporter of me. And look at my list. I'm the only one that is, I've got OU VPs because they understand that if you want to fix a problem, you've got to at least try to support it from the beginning. And Mr. Weber, you're endorsed by GLEP, and that's the Great Lakes Education Project. It's a big DeVos group. They've started it, and they want to privatize our schools. And I don't want to make money on kids, because you're not going to make money on special needs kids. You might make it on my kids because they were pretty easygoing. And I see this as part of the problem, not the solution. Thank you.
How about Mr. Weber?
Well, you know, I appreciate it, and I appreciate the question, and I'm proud to be supported by the Great Lakes Education Project. I'm also proud to be a product of our public schools. So I guess to answer the question, my priority would be our public schools, but I think that there is certainly room for charters. There's certainly room for some online stuff, and I've had some discussions with Dr. Shaner about, you know, the challenges of, you know, if a kid is doing an online course versus, you know, in the classroom, and how you watch over that, and how you grade it, and all that kind of stuff. But Great Lakes Education Project, I'm certainly not a spokesman for them, but they are very much for rigorous standards in our public schools. And it's not just closing down public schools. I mean, one of the issues that they've been talking about in Lansing over the last few months is being proficient in reading by the end of your third grade level. Now, I think everybody can agree, everybody at this table, everybody in the audience can agree that that certainly should be a goal. You know, certainly for our little James, who's going to be 15 months old, you know, I would like to see him be proficient at reading by the time, you know, he's in the third grade, or he really should not be moving forward. So, you know, it's a priority for me. I'm proud to be a product of our public schools, but I think that there's room for charters. There's room for other venues as well.
Thank you. Mr. Avery?
Well, first of all, the one thing that we haven't discussed at all here is results. And I spent some time with Dr. Rusty after we left OU about higher education and how it's kind of transforming, and how education should be transformed in the future. And one of the things he told me, which I took to heart, was every kid doesn't learn alike. So the idea that we're going to teach every kid the same way, whether it's at the higher education level or at the lower education level, seems to be failing in a lot of areas. So I would look at results. I wouldn't look at the process. We need to find different things that work for different kids. So is it online courses? It might be. Is it the regular public schools system? That might be the way to go. But I think we need to start looking at the results and not just the process. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Mangiapane?
Since we're talking about third grade reading level, of the 3rd to 8th graders, 30% are below grade level in their reading. And I think that's something that we always need to address. I would like to say that all my children graduated from Rochester public schools, and all of my grandchildren are homeschooled. Now, they also take some public school courses online. Public schools are all now going all the way to 12th grade online. Charter schools are public schools, and there's places that they need to be too, because there's areas and districts where you wouldn't want your children to walk to school, and very few people do, and that's why those schools have closed down. I think I am a person of choice, and I think that we ought to be able to choose the best situation for our children and for us so that they can reach their highest potential.
Thank you. Mr. Weber?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, and I'm glad Mrs. Mangiapane brought up homeschool. Just a week ago, I was at a house where the family is homeschooling, I believe, 5 or 6 of their kids. So there's different options. I think, the one-size-fits-all approach is certainly not working, and I know the legislature just last week talked a little bit more about career tech and kind of the manufacturing, trying to bring that back into the fold. I believe in 05 or 06, when the legislature and the governor kind of going through these standards, it was kind of a one-size-fits-all, and the career tech part was not being emphasized, and so that we're going back to that. So I was glad to see that.
Ms. VanRaaphorst?
I agree with you on many points, but here's a different take on it. We say that each child is unique and different, because they sure are. My daughter read in kindergarten, and my son was almost at the end of 3rd grade, and I'm like, holy smokes, when is this boy going to learn to read? Because you cannot teach development. But to that end, a week or two ago, they were saying, if you don't pass this one reading test, then you will have to be retained. And now it's going to cost us another $7,500 to have that child be in school. Why aren't we putting that money K to 2 and getting extra support? Every single teacher wants the children to read at level. I have a sister who teaches 5th grade. She has kids that go home to an empty home, dad's in jail, mom's cleaning rooms at some hotel, and they're making dinner, and they're not reading. And so, we need to be realistic that if they are not doing it, to just have them flunk, if you will, the old-fashioned term. That is wasting money. The money could be much better spent K-12 to help these, or K-2 to get them to reading levels. And that was an unfunded mandate. So what does that do for the schools?
Thank you. And your question is for?
All of them. All of them. What's your position on the unlimited catastrophic coverage, for one? And also, since we're speaking a lot about protecting the children, how about your position on protecting senior citizens on handling their end-of-term needs with the Affordable Care Act and so forth? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's start with Ms. Mangiapane, please.
As I thought you would.
It was random, trust me.
I am guardian for 2 senior citizens, and both have lives that have been on edge since December 1st. So I've had them in hospitals, I've had them in rehab centers. One right now is in the hospital. She's in Beaumont Hospital. She was in there because she collapsed, and after she collapsed, she was taken to the hospital, and when she went to the hospital, she coded. They were not reviving her, and I told them, I want her revived. They were letting her die, and they told me to come and say goodbye. Then they brought her back, and about 20 minutes later, she coded again, and I said, you will revive her. I do not want her dead. So then she has been in the hospital. She was released from that hospital, and 4 days later, they didn't treat her at all. They withheld care, and 4 days later, she had to go back into the hospital because she was having a terrible, terrible headache, and she just said she wanted to go to the hospital. I took her there. We got her there. They tested her. It was a wonderful emergency room doctor. She went into a room. Then she was in there, and on Tuesday, they took away her food. They took away her medicine. They took away her hydration, and they took away her monitors. And I went in there and I said, why doesn't she have these things? And the doctor had told them to take them away. So I call that, when you take those things away, lethal neglect. And constantly you're going to fight the neglect for senior citizens. And Shirley was she's in another facility, and they have wanted to let her expire, and I didn't, and she's walking, well, she's not walking around right now because one of the people in the facility ran over both her feet and broke them. But she will also be able to heal from that. But she's walking and talking, and I think that everybody needs to have a chance to have their life, and we can't judge their quality of life because that's up to them. And some people say quantity isn't important, just quality, and if you can't live like a 30-year-old, then you shouldn't have a life.
Thank you. Mr. Avery.
First of all, I can't believe that we're actually discussing the fact that our government is going to determine whether our parents live or die. I think that's extremely sad that we now have put ourselves in a position. That is a very sad story with what Lana just told, but I think that story is going to happen more and more as we work toward Obamacare as we hear it. So for me, the faster we can get rid of Obamacare, and trust me, that's one of the first things people say on the door, how quickly can we get rid of Obamacare? And I'm like, I'm sorry, we're running for state office. But that is probably the second issue that I hear on the door is how do we get rid of Obamacare, and that's one of the primary reasons is the end of life.
Thank you. Mr. Weber?
Yeah, I agree. I also hear.
Excuse me, Mr. Weber has the floor, please. Mr. Weber.
Yeah, I also agree that Obamacare is not that popular at the doors. But I guess in terms of the no-fault auto part of the question, I certainly support the current system. I think there needs to, I think it's not going to be an issue that's going to go away in that the insurance, and I am a licensed insurance agent, the insurance companies are going to continue to look at that. But, as I've talked with home health care professionals in the area, no one asked to be in a crash like this. And each one of us could get into a crash like this tomorrow. You look at just what happened with our county executive, and obviously his driver is still never going to fully recover. And so, capping some of those things, I don't think it is the right approach. At the same token, they're talking about transparency. I think we do need greater transparency in terms of the MCCA. But then also there's been discussion, and I do agree with this part of it, is in terms of what the healthcare providers are charging, and does that increase the cost? Are they charging different for those cases versus workers' comp cases versus somebody that just, has an accident, at their home? So I think we have to look at all those, make sure we have a sustainable system. But we do have one of the best in terms of that. Our state has one of the best in the country, and so certainly wouldn't want to see that go.
Thank you. Ms. VanRaaphorst?
I agree with you. I agree with all three of you. I believe that we have a really neat system here in Michigan where we do cover people unlimited, because if you value their life, you value their life if they got in an accident and are paralyzed. And you can't just say, well, your life's good enough for $1 million. And in fact, that's one of the reasons. That was the first time I met Tom McMillan. Was he was, let's cap it, let's, reduce it. And he was sitting in a group full of people in wheelchairs kind of arguing with them, and I was quite astonished. And to your question about end of life, yes, of course. If you want to go till your last breath, then you are entitled to have all the care you want. My dad was the opposite. He went through hospice, and he said, I'm done. I don't want my next cancer treatment. And we went to hospice, and we were all there when he died peacefully. So that is an individual choice, and I support that wholeheartedly.
Mr. Avery? No? Okay. Next question. Who's the question for?
My question's for all four candidates. The state legislature, in concert with our seated governor, a few years ago imposed a state income tax on pensions that had previously throughout the entire working careers of the recipients been promised as tax-free. In addition to the immediate financial strain this imposes on our pensioners, this action actually has the net impact of hurting our state's economy by taking this money out of circulation vis-a-vis a relative reduced level of demand statewide. I spoke before a House committee to this effect. What's your position on the repeal of the Republican-sponsored tax on pensions?
Let's start with Michael Weber. Mr. Weber.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate the question. Actually, Governor Snyder was at our OPC maybe just a few weeks ago where he gave a message on seniors and senior issues, and I think he had a little bit different take on the question. You know, in terms of the tax, you know, I think it was part of a larger package where, you know, trying to get the economy going again. And I think they looked at what a lot of other states did. Certainly Governor Snyder said at the OPC that this kind of gets us more in the middle of the pack, if you will. And I think it's just one of those deals where, you know, certainly the taxes pay for services. They pay for our public safety, they pay for our roads, they pay for our education, and I think everybody needs to pay their fair share. So I would, you know, I support what the legislature and the governor did in that regard in terms of the package that passed a few years ago.
Mark Avery. Mr. Avery.
As a package deal, I understand why they did it. When you meet people at the door, that is one of the issues that the retirees ask is, why'd you take it away? I guess as a legislator, you make the best choice you can on these issues, but we've made promises to seniors, or we make a promise to a senior and then we change the rules. I think that's one of the biggest issues that everybody has when they're dealing with their government is we're going to tell you one thing one day and we're going to change it the next, and that's probably the second most thing I hear on the door. We're tired of politicians changing the rules on us all the time and making things change. So whatever I choose to do as a legislator, I would hope that we're going to stick to what we're going to do. And as the pension, we should have stuck to the original program because that's what we promised all of the seniors. Then we should have stuck to the program.
Lana Mangiapane.
I don't think that we should be double or triple, quadruple taxed, because not only are you taxed when you make the money, then you're taxed when you get the money out, you're taxed with whatever you buy with that money. So I don't believe that you should be. I do not know all the details of that package right now, but I do know that I don't believe that people should be more than taxed one time in the money and then spend it. You know, they're going to have to spend it on all their commodities, but I don't think it should be come back around and tax it again. I think that's wrong.
Joanna VanRaaphorst. Ms. VanRaaphorst.
Well, you can't unretire, and that's the problem. You're set for life, and if you're like my parents, they had a budget from when I was in kindergarten on up, and my dad was a retiree, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. That was part of the tax package that, it's interesting because Republicans always say, we won't raise taxes, but they raised taxes. They raised taxes on senior pensions, they eliminated the senior discount, and for the general population, there was the child tax deduction that was eliminated, and the homestead tax credit. So that's raising taxes. And I'm not saying that's necessarily bad, but you can't have it both ways. And I would like to see the budget where we could possibly take it back, and so you go back to what you were promised, because I've said it before, and I'll say it again, you can't unretire. And we were just on a trip, and we met young men that were from Australia, and they were touring the United States for 2.5 months, and they said, there's all sorts of old people working everywhere in America. This was their impression. I said, yeah, they do. And I don't think that's fair.
Thank you. And who is your question for?
All four candidates. Real simple question on two subjects. It's kind of a yes or no question. First of all, if you had a chance to vote on Common Core to repeal it, would you repeal it, yes or no? And secondly, do you believe in global warming, yes or no?
Okay, how about Mr. Weber?
Yes, I would vote to repeal Common Core, and no, I do not believe in global warming.
Mr. Avery.
So we're supposed to answer these really difficult questions with with a yes or no. So you're going to take global warming, which is a very complicated process, and say yes or no. All right, Common Core repeal, yes. Global warming, no.
Lana sorry. Oh, Lana Mangiapane.
I vote no on Common Core because I don't believe that we should teach to a test. If you ask me this week if I believe in global warming, this week I did. But overall, I don't believe in the criteria that they're using for global warming right now.
Thank you. Joanna VanRaaphorst.
Holy smokes. I guess I completely disagree. Common Core, it's in the works. We've been spending months and years going toward Common Core. I think what I hear from some folks when I go door to door is like, we don't want government interference and blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, it really wasn't, President Obama writing tests for our kids to take. It was developed by a governor's group with the idea that, and I totally agree with it, if you're from Maine or you're from Alaska or you're from Alabama, you should know the same thing. 2 + 2 is 4 all around. A. B, people travel from state to state. I have a friend that just moved here. Their daughter's a junior. She has to kind of completely reconfigure her classes because it's not common. I mean, it's not standardized. And if we want our kids to excel, we want even higher standards. And so I find that I think people got off track thinking it was a government takeover on this. So I don't agree with that premise, and I would keep it going. I do have some flaws with it. I think they're too tough on K through 2nd grade. I think you can't teach development, and I think they're testing kids too early. You should not have kindergartners. And to the second question, global warming,
just to remind you, it was asked as a yes/no question.
Oh, sorry. And global warming, yes, of course. I'm married to a scientist, and my son's a scientist, for heaven's sakes.
Lana Mangiapane, did you have your hand up for a rebuttal?
Yes, I did. There were 2 things that I wanted to address that Joanna said. First of all, I have 2 grandchildren that are considered geniuses, and I also have 3 grandchildren that have problems. And none of them would be good matches for Common Core. And the other thing I wanted to address is the MEP course is going out. No matter what, there's not going to be any more MEP as of 2015, and I suppose all of you are aware of that. So they were planning to change the course no matter what.
Mr. Avery, did you have your hand up before or after Mr. Weber?
I think before, no.
Okay, Mr. Avery.
Well, since yes and no doesn't mean yes and no. On the Common Core issue, you can see there's a distinct difference between the 2 sides here. One side would like to see the government take over all aspects of our lives, and one side would like to see the government kind of get pushed out of our lives. So the idea that Common Core is a national thing and everybody learns the same thing versus our local districts making decisions is definitely different on both sides. And as global warming, I always ask the question, it's Newton's law of gravity. It's not Newton's consensus of gravity. So until it becomes a law, then it's kind of hard to ask an engineer to believe in a consensus.
Mr. Weber.
Yeah, I was just going to add on Common Core. I think, to be opposed to Common Core is not necessarily to be opposed to rigorous standards or being opposed to, not wanting our kids to move forward and succeed. I think, and I've heard Rep. McMillan talk about this, and I think, he would even agree with Ms. VanRaaphorst that there are probably some good elements to it. But I think the biggest issue is if you adopt it, can you change it? Can you make it fit specifically to Michigan? And should our local school boards and our state legislatures make those decisions versus somebody at the federal level? And I think that that's the biggest thing. I think you could have most of what is in Common Core, a part of it, but the states and the local level needs to make those decisions so that they can then adapt it if it's not working the way they think it should be working.
Thank you very much. And your question is for?
My question is for all of the candidates, and as a carry on to what the conversation you just had, I would ask first a yes or no question, and that is how many of you have read the standards? And then the second question that I'd ask, which is the one I wanted to ask, is it's been 20 years since Michigan voters passed Proposal A, which is how we fund our public schools in the state of Michigan. And at the same time, we started experimenting with school choice, mostly in charters and now in cybers. And the two of those are incongruent. And so in the last 10 years, we've lost 200,000 students in the state, and yet we've gained a net increase of 160 new charter schools. So my question is, what would you do with Proposal A to make, to align the way we fund our schools with the system of schools we have? Thank you.
So let's start with Mr. Weber.
Well, you know, I feel like I've heard that a few times here, Carla, but yeah, I certainly appreciate the question. I appreciate Ms. Albrecht, her service on the State Board of Education on behalf of our community. You know, in terms of yes or no on reading the standards, I have not read all the standards. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. But in terms of Proposal A, I think, you know, it's certainly a little more complex than a 2-minute answer. I mean, Proposal A was something that was put in place, obviously, when Governor Engler was there, but in concert with, I think it was State Senator Stabenow at the time, and worked through that process to get that on the ballot. And you know, people have talked in the past about tweaking Proposal A or this and that. You know, I'm certainly open to legislatures and the governor always looking at school funding in the future. But I think, you know, to repeal Proposal A or something outlandish like that is not something I would support.
Ms. Mangiapane.
Well, I like Proposal A because that's made property ownership more affordable, and we've got to continue to be aware that rising taxes in times of declining values and tax burdens are a disincentive to buy in Michigan, and it's a disincentive to business in Michigan. Also, as far as I understand, a lot of people are concerned about charter schools. I'm a realtor. I helped with people to find locations for charter schools, and they were all in areas where the students were basically afraid to go to school. And charter schools are public, and they're with a lot of public money, and partnered with other people, and they do give the students and the parents much more choices and safety and choice for the subjects and the type of education their children want. And I am for public school, very much for public school. That's where I went to.
Thank you. Ms. VanRaaphorst?
Well, I think this is going to be something that has to be delved into quite thoroughly, because I don't think Proposal A is doing everything that we wanted to do as far as equalizing all the schools. That's not working, and I've heard, so that is something, I don't have all the answers right now, but to me, I think we need to have a very thorough task force on that, because if it's not working, then we have to go to plan, instead of Proposal A, maybe Proposal B, because I don't think it's working that well. And I think the other question was, what was it?
Have you read the standards?
I have not read the standards, but I've talked to a boatload of teachers who have. In fact, my twin sister can recite it, and that, I think, is the key. And I think what's important in this conversation, has anybody talked to our local schools about the Common Core? Because my understanding is we were on board to follow it. So why are we going against our own schools? They're going toward it. They've started it. It needs to be tweaked, of course, but to retool the factory, I think, makes no sense at all.
Mr. Avery?
Proposal A was designed to help keep senior citizens in their homes when the values are rising so fast, and they had to create that secondary system, because if they didn't create that taxable value system, the taxes would have increased so fast on senior citizens that it would have actually pushed them right out of their homes. So that was one of the major reasons why they did the Proposal A. Second part about the students, we lost 200,000 students, as you had stated, but that's because we lost how many people that left the state because they didn't have jobs. So until you bring people back into the state, you're not going to have an increased level of students in the state of Michigan. So we have to create a business environment that brings more people back here. In turn, we'll have more students.
Thank you, Ms. Mangiapane.
I did read the Common Core about 2 years ago when it first came out.
Thank you. And your question is for?
My name is Louis Carriot from Rochester Hills. Early on, we heard from the Republican candidates how they would differentiate themselves in terms of policies and practices at the state level from the Representative Tom McMillan. I would like to pose that same question to Joanna VanRaaphorst. How would you differentiate yourself in terms of policy and practices?
Ms. VanRaaphorst.
Well, we're night and day. I do appreciate Tom McMillan's crystal clear vision of a very socially conservative, here's the world, and you need to fit in that, and anybody else is out. His anti-gay stance is appalling. His anti-woman stance, I think, is appalling. I think his anti-union stance is appalling. But, I mean, I think he's a nice person. But basically, because I do respect his work ethic and his zeal. But to answer your question, I'm quite a bit opposite. And that was, the reason I decided to run is when I met Tom McMillan at a community forum. And he was rude, smug, arrogant, and indifferent to 50 people. Now, I can handle it when you do it to me, but when you have a group of local people from the neighborhood house that want his help with some thaw bill, and again, he was rude, smug, arrogant, indifferent, and you could tell, don't know, don't care. That's when I decided to run. I got in the car, I said, I guess I'm running for state representative, because fanaticism, we have no place for this extreme ideology that he espouses, and I reject it.
Thank you. And your question is for?
My question is for all four candidates. It has to do with our wonderful Michigan roads.
Oh, yeah.
I would like to know why each of you thinks that our roads have gotten into the condition that they are. How did that happen? And what would each of you propose to do to remedy the problem, assuming you agree we do have a problem?
Okay, let's start with Mr. Avery.
First of all, it's the number one issue at the door is the roads. The funding of the roads, on $4 a gallon of gas right now in the state of Michigan, we spend 59 cents on taxes. We have the federal tax and then we have the state tax, but we also have that 22 cents of sales tax. None of that money goes to the roads. The quickest way I feel to fix the roads would be to take all the money that we spend on gas, all the taxes, and put them toward the roads. Number two, there are some engineering issues that we're dealing with on the weight of the trucks that are definitely an issue. And number three, if you look at some of these roads are breaking, take Livernois between Avon and Walton. We all saw a couple years after that thing got poured, all the seams broke out. That's one of the issues that I think there's some engineering issues. So I think it's more of a comprehensive program, but to get the money, I think we should spend our tax money that we draw from gas and spend it all on the roads to fix them.
Thank you. Mrs. Mangiapane.
Well, you all probably know that Michigan has 121,000 miles of road in it. And we are the 6th highest nationwide for gasoline taxes, which are 41.4 cents per gallon. And our sales tax brings it up to 59.7 cents per gallon. You probably want to know why I have all these facts, because all these things really bother me all year round. I'm constantly trying to find out why we're having these problems. Also, in my going door to door, roads was number 1, schools were number 2, and taxes were number 3 with every house I went to. And so I think that that's kind of important for you all, and probably your all's most serious issues. We lose $3 million a day annually in transportation assets. That's $1 billion a year. And to maintain our current system, we need $1.6 billion more per year than we currently spend. And you're suffering great losses. All of our citizens are suffering great losses right now because we're fixing our cars. Approximately $357 per person per year to replace tires, struts, and shocks. And the major, there's three major factors in accidents. One is drivers, one is vehicles, and the third is roadway features. And with the money for roadways, you pay for other things for roads, you pay for things other than just the roads. You pay for the number of lanes, the lane widths, the lighting rumble strips, shoulders, guardrails, and other shielding devices, medium barriers, and intersection design. We have a very serious problem with our roads. We must find the money. I was an elected official several years ago, and I've been continuously working for the benefit of our community all these years, and I believe that good infrastructures, and we really need good infrastructures, build better communities and makes our nation better and safer.
Thank you. Mr. Weber.
Yeah, I'm surprised it took almost an hour and a half to get to this question here. This is by far the biggest issue at the doors. And, I would lean on the experience that we've had at the city council level. You have to budget for your priorities. And when I took office on city council, it was right during the middle of the lost decade. We had recessionary period, and we basically only had the money to do our, little bit of maintenance and our snow plowing and our salting in the wintertime. And we have a citizen-led committee. They actually were meeting right behind that door there. They've been together for about 5-6 years now, and they said, this is not right. And between some of the budgeting issues that we've been able to do, we've had a 20% reduction in our city staff. We were able to lower our healthcare costs by going to a PPO program that saved about $700,000 the first year. We were able then, with those recommendations and some votes of the people as well, not to raise the overall tax rate, but to dedicate more money directly to local roads. We have now been able to budget nearly $5 million a year for the next 5 years. We do have a 3-year budget with an outlook, and because of that committee's recommendation, we've been able to do it. So the money at the state level, I've heard for years as a staff person, the money's not there, the money's not there. The House came up with a plan that came up with an annual $500 million. Now, when you get into the state gas tax, a good portion of that money goes towards schools and local governments. So I think that needs to be looked at, needs to be addressed. But I agree, people want to see the money that they're paying at the pump go towards roads. The other thing is, certainly with fuel-efficient vehicles, is gas tax going to be the answer eventually? And I would say no. I would say you need probably some fresh set of eyes to look at that issue going forward and come up with a better solution, because people are frustrated with Lansing and their inaction on the roads, that's for sure.
Ms. VanRaaphorst.
Well, I got a nice flyer from you, Mark. Avery, that said, it's about, it was your flyer from, funded by the Americans for Prosperity, which is, I thought was kind of interesting. But anyway, it says, we can fix Michigan roads without raising taxes. And in it, it says, Lansing siphons off those dollars for non-road pet projects and programs. But the pet projects are K-12 and fire and police. So, the problem is, in Lansing, my understanding, I met with Tim Greimel again for 3 hours on Monday, is they were willing to stay for the entire summer to figure this out. They're paid, what, $71,000, and they're taking 3 months off, and just said, I give up. Again, it's corporate. If you were in a corporation, you'd be fired because you're not doing your job. And so I agree with Governor Snyder. He's been pushing for 2 years to get proper funding. If it costs money, it costs money. We are 50th in the nation on per person funding for our roads, and this is what we get. I mean, you get what you pay for. And I'm not saying, oh, I want to raise taxes. It's a difficult situation, but it's untenable, and we cannot attract businesses when they can't come on the roads. I mean, you do that overpass by, as you leave OU, can you imagine somebody coming into town? It's embarrassing, it's appalling, and I'm not saying it's all the Republicans' fault, but they left Lansing. They left for the summer, and they didn't do their job, and I think the governor should call them back and say, get back to Lansing, and don't leave until you figure this out. That's all I'm saying.
So I have some sad news, and that is that we have run out of time. Unfortunately, we do not have time for rebuttal because we would like to get in closing statements. For those of you watching at home, we probably have another 25 questions that this audience would like to ask, and I'd like to say thank you right now to the audience for such good questions and for being involved. So I'd like to move immediately to our 30-second closing statements. I will be timing these very tightly. We will start in reverse order, and we will start with Ms. Joanna VanRaaphorst. Ms. VanRaaphorst.
Well, there's a stark difference between me, a moderate Democrat who's a small business owner and got in the race, not because of a party, it's because I really care about our community. And I don't really need this job, and I'm willing to stand up for our city, and I'm standing up to my party, any party, to do what's best for our community. I'm happy to do it.
Thank you. Mark Avery, Mr. Avery.
Okay, we need to be more responsible and more transparent in government in Michigan. If we do not continue to improve the business climate in the state of Michigan, we're going to have a whole lot of issues, because if we can't hire our college graduates and our high school graduates, they're going to continue to be exported throughout the state of Michigan. And so my goal is to create a situation and a business climate that we can start to grow our businesses and keep our kids here in the state of Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Avery. Michael Weber, Mr. Weber.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk tonight. And again, my name is Michael Weber. I'm a conservative Republican running the Republican primary August 5th. Certainly appreciate your consideration, appreciate your vote. Certainly results at the city council level. Also been a staff member in Lansing for about 9.5 years. I can hit the ground running from day one and be a leader from day one in a term-limited environment.
Thank you. And Lana Mangiapane, Ms. Mangiapane.
Ultimately, every member of society shares the responsibility to play an active role in making our community a safer, better place to live, to raise children, run our businesses, and forge a future filled with unlimited promise. If you share my vision, I urge you to connect with me and help make it happen. Together, we can make a meaningful difference for our families, our communities, our state, and our country. Vote for Lana Mangiapane.
Thank you very much, and thank you from the League of Women Voters, Oakland area, to all the candidates for participating in tonight's forum. We thank you, audience, for coming and participating. I'm telling you, we could be here for another couple of hours easily. And I think the candidates will probably be happy to stay afterwards and answer any questions you may have. Our appreciation goes to the City of Rochester Hills, Mayor Barnett, the council members of Rochester Hills, as well as the Rochester Hills employees, Jason Dale in the back, and his crew, Eric and Erica, for providing tonight's outstanding venue. Tonight's forum will be rebroadcast on many of the city's cable stations. In Rochester Hills, that's Comcast Channel 20, WOW Channel 10, and AT&T Channel 99. Probably several times before the August 5th election. It will also be on demand anytime you want to watch it on the city's website, rochesterhills.org. It will also be shown on cable stations throughout the other communities that State Representative District 45 is a part of. So on behalf of Ann Edwards, the coordinator of tonight's forum, and all the League of Women Voter volunteers who've helped during tonight's event, thank you very much. Remember to vote on Tuesday, August 5th. Good night.
I have to do that all the time. I'm in